My parents charged me $1,800 to stay in my childhood room while my sister lived rent-free, until I stopped tolerating favoritism, exposed the truth, and the consequences made their lives collapse overnight.
I'm 32, male, and have been an oil rig worker for the last decade. Not talking about that cushy offshore management. I'm talking actual steel and sweat work where one wrong move means someone doesn't go home. 14-hour shifts in weather that would make office workers call in sick for a month. The job's hell, but the money's solid if you're smart with it. While my college buddies were busy racking up student loans for degrees they don't use, I was banking serious cash. Own my house outright in a decent neighborhood. No mortgage, no roommates, zero debt. Drive a 2018 F-250 that I paid cash for. Nothing flashy, just a reliable workhorse that handles North Dakota winters without complaint. Converted my garage into a home gym that would make most commercial setups look like Fisher-Price toys. Full power rack, competition bench, enough plates to sink a small boat, and a deadlift platform I built myself that can handle the 585 I pull on good days. When you work as hard as I do, you need somewhere to channel that energy when you're home. My family comes from a different world entirely. Dad runs what he calls a real estate agency, which is really just him flipping foreclosures on credit and crossing his fingers the market doesn't hiccup. Hasn't turned an honest profit since 2012, but still drives a leased car and wears those ridiculous slim-fit suits that make him look like he's being slowly digested by a snake. Mom's full-time occupation is masquerading as old money at charity functions where the actual donations are less than what people spend on outfits. She's got the act down pat, the subtle jewelry that's actually expensive, the practiced laugh that suggests private school education she never had. Then there's my younger brother Kevin, 30, who introduces himself as a tech entrepreneur and CEO at family gatherings. What that actually translates to is an unemployed mooch living in my parents' pool house that I renovated with $23,000 of my own money during a particularly weak moment 3 years ago. Kevin still lives in our parents' finished basement, rent-free of course, and has the audacity to call it his startup incubator, even though the only thing incubating down there is the mold on his unwashed clothes. Dad introduces him as the CEO's son at church functions, while Mom still does his laundry and cooks his favorite meals every Sunday. They treat him like he's the second coming of Steve Jobs. Meanwhile, I'm just the blue-collar disappointment who pays for everything but gets zero respect, the family ATM with a pulse. Since 2017, I've kept track in a spreadsheet, like the idiot I am. The damage $12,500 to Dad for business taxes he forgot about, $8,800 to Mom for her emergency surgery, cosmetic dental work, and Botox, $27,600 to Kevin, spread across 11 different ventures that all evaporated like morning dew. That's nearly $49,000 over 5 years that just disappeared into the family money pit. Not a single cent returned. Not even a genuine thank you beyond the immediate relief once the check cleared. It's been the same story since I started making real money. The calls always come at the same time, just after payday, like they've got my direct deposit schedule taped to their fridge. Always an emergency, always can't wait another day, urgent, always just this once, and I'll pay you back when things turn around. The worst part? I knew what was happening. Wasn't blind or stupid, just had this messed up sense of obligation because that's what family does. Like I owed them for raising me, even though what they mostly raised was their expectations of what I could give them. Last December marked the beginning of the end, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Working night shift on the rig during a particularly brutal cold snap, equipment failure on the drill floor, metal fatigue accelerated by sub-zero temperatures. A tensioner gave way, and a section of heavy chain whipped across the platform like an angry snake. Caught me square across the right side, snapped my collarbone clean through. Pain unlike anything I'd experienced before. Not the muscle burn of a heavy workout or the dull ache of a long shift. This was white-hot lightning shooting from shoulder to fingertips. Breath-stealing and vision blurring. Medevac helicopter to the nearest hospital with a trauma center. Surgery to pin the bone back together. Doctor, a no-nonsense woman with forearms like she climbed mountains on weekends, said 6 weeks minimum recovery before even thinking about light duty. Said if I rushed it, I risked permanent nerve damage and reduced strength on my dominant side for life. Was back on site in 12 days. Not because I was healed, the surgical staples were barely out, but because my crew was short-handed during the holiday rush when demand spikes and everyone's pushing to hit year-end quotas. Plus, workers' comp only covers so much. Bills don't stop just because you're injured. Know how many times my family visited during recovery? Zero. Not once, not even a drive-by. Dad was swamped with year-end closings, Mom had her Christmas charity circuit. Kevin was networking in Aspen on my parents' dime. The only person who showed was Megan, 28, female, ER nurse at County General who works trauma shifts that would break most people. She drove 3 hours through a snowstorm after pulling a 12-hour overnight to help me bathe because I couldn't lift my arm above waist level on day 3 of my recovery. While I was half-conscious, on prescribed painkillers, a card arrived from my family. Baby blue envelope with a cartoon bear holding a get-well-soon balloon. Megan opened it since my fingers weren't working right. Inside was a note from Mom in her flowing handwriting. Hope you're healing fast. When you're back on your feet, can you look at the garage door opener? It's acting up again. Also, we're short on the pool house utilities this month, about $340. Thanks. No, how are you feeling? No, we're worried about you. No, can we bring you anything? Just a goddamn to-do list and an invoice disguised as concern. When I asked Megan what it said, she just stared at me for a long beat, then crumpled it and tossed it in the trash without a word. Later that night, when she thought I was asleep, I heard her on the phone with someone, voice low but intense. They don't even care that he's hurt, just what he can do for them. It's sick. The next morning, while changing my bandages, she finally said what she'd been holding back. You know they don't love you, right? They love what you give them. There's a difference. I didn't defend them, just let the words hang there like smoke after a gunshot. Recovery was brutal. Physical therapy exercises 3 times a day. Learning to do everything with my left hand, sleeping upright in a recliner because lying down sent pain shooting through my shoulder. Through all of it, my phone kept lighting up with texts from the family, not asking how I was doing, just variations on when will you be back at work. Translation, when will the money start flowing again? 2 months after the collarbone break, with my arms still not quite right and physical therapy exercises becoming part of my daily routine, Kevin got engaged. Found out through a group text with professional photos attached. They were posed on a dock in Aspen at sunset, Kevin in a cashmere sweater I'd never seen before, arm around a blonde in a white turtleneck and caramel leather boots. Her name was Brittany. Turns out Brittany came from serious wealth. Not new money, not social media wealth, but generational, compound interest for decades wealth. Her father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across 3 states, the kind of family that doesn't talk about money because they've had it for so long they don't need to think about it. Suddenly, Kevin was acting like he'd just been drafted first round to the NFL. Started posting entrepreneurial wisdom on LinkedIn. Phrases like wealth mindset and success attracts success. Paired with photos of him in hotel lobbies he didn't actually stay in. This dude who hadn't held a job longer than 3 months was suddenly a business guru because he'd managed to convince a rich girl into thinking he was something special. And my parents were eating it up, like it validated all their years of enabling him. 2 weeks after the engagement announcement, Mom called. Her voice had that extra layer of sweetness that always meant she wanted something. They were hosting an engagement dinner for Kevin and Brittany, private event at an upscale restaurant downtown called Skyline. 7:00 p.m. sharp, cocktail attire required. I just said I'd be there, not asking questions. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, make sure you wear something appropriate. Brittany's family is very refined. And do something about those hands, maybe a manicure. They look so industrial. Yeah, because the calloused hands that had paid for her kitchen renovation might offend the delicate sensibilities of those people. But I swallowed the insult like I always did. Night before the dinner, got a call from Uncle Bobby. He's Dad's older brother, retired Marine Corps who did 3 tours in Afghanistan before transitioning to private security work, only member of the family with an actual spine and the only one who doesn't speak fluent bullshit. They're expecting you to cover the bill, he said. No hello, just straight to the point. How would you know that? I asked, already feeling my gut tighten. Your mom called me earlier, fishing to see if I'd help you out since you might be tight on cash after the injury. Said the dinner might run $4 or $5 grand, and they wanted to make sure you wouldn't make a scene about it. I didn't say much after that, just thanked him for the heads up and hung up. Spent the night pacing my living room, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to no-show, leave them hanging, but another part needed to see just how far they'd push this. Needed confirmation that I wasn't imagining the disrespect. So I showed up at Skyline at 6:57 p.m. Valet line looked like a luxury car dealership showcase. Range Rovers, Mercedes G-Wagons, at least 2 Ferraris. Mine was the only pickup truck in line. Handed the keys to the valet like I owned the place and walked in with my shoulders back. Skyline occupied the top 2 floors of one of the tallest buildings downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a 360-degree view of the city that looked almost unreal. Main dining area featured a U-shaped table arrangement with seating for about 20, crystal glasses catching the light. Fancy silverware that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I walked up without fanfare, a $120 bottle of champagne in hand. Kevin spotted me mid-sentence, and his expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight downturn at the corners of his mouth. Then the mask slipped back into place, and he smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, hey, big guy. We, ran out of room at the main table." He nodded toward the far side of the room. "There's a spot for you over there." I turned to look where he was pointing. They had placed a single metal chair at a square service table directly adjacent to the busing station, right next to where servers were scraping leftover food into a waste bin. 6 feet from where half-eaten steaks and congealing sauce were being dumped into industrial trash cans. No tablecloth, no place setting, no silverware. Just a metal chair, a plastic cup of water, and a front-row view of the restaurant's waste disposal system. I looked back at the main table, 20 pairs of eyes watching with varying degrees of interest or discomfort. Mom gave me that tight, close-lipped smile people use when they're silently begging you not to make a scene. Dad suddenly found his napkin fascinating, studying its folds like it contained the secrets of the universe. So I sat down at the trash table, not because I accepted it, but because I wanted to see how far they'd push this, how blatant the disrespect would get before anyone, acknowledged the situation. I wanted to prove to myself once and for all exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. The answer apparently was somewhere below the busing station, but slightly above the actual garbage. Sat there in silence for nearly 3 hours while 20 people feasted. Watched them work through 5 courses of food that probably cost more than most families spend on groceries for a month. I didn't even get offered a piece of bread or a glass of water beyond the plastic cup already at my table when I arrived. From my garbage-adjacent seat, I could hear snippets of conversation. Kevin gave some speech about family values while Mom dabbed her eyes like this was the goddamn Oscars. Meanwhile, I was close enough to the busing station that I occasionally had to lean away to avoid getting splashed by sauce being scraped off plates. The whole situation was so absurd it almost became funny. These people who claimed to be family had literally sat me next to the trash and were acting like it was perfectly normal. Like I should be grateful to even be in the same room. Checked my phone around the 2-hour mark and saw a text from Megan. "How's the fancy dinner going?" My reply was simple. They sat me next to the freaking trash. Her response came back almost instantly. "Are you kidding me? Get up. Walk out. They don't respect you. Never have." Then a few minutes later, a message from Uncle Bobby. "How's the royal feast treating you?" I sent him a single sentence. "I'm literally sitting next to a garbage can." His reply was just 4 words. "Take pictures. Trust me." So I did. Subtle snapshots that wouldn't attract attention. One of my metal chair and bare table. One of the main table 15 feet away with its elaborate place settings and floral centerpieces. One of the trash bin directly behind me where servers had been scraping plates all night. I didn't feel angry anymore, just a strange calm, like I was watching all of this happen to someone else, like I'd finally stepped outside the delusion and could see the situation for what it really was. It was approaching 10 p.m. when they finally finished their elaborate dessert course. I'd been sitting at the same metal chair for over 3 hours, watching, waiting, saying nothing. Hadn't been offered so much as a bread roll or glass of wine the entire time. My answer came when a waiter approached my table, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Young guy, probably working through college. He was holding a black leather folder. "Sir," he said, voice professional but tense, "the final bill for the evening comes to $4,287.53. Would you like to handle that now or—" I opened the folder and scanned the itemized list. Premium liquor charges totaling over $900, multiple $120 steaks, appetizer platters at $85 each, desserts running $35 per person, a service charge already included. I didn't react outwardly, just quietly closed the folder, placed it on the metal chair next to me, stood up and said in a normal conversational tone, "I'm not part of this group." The silence that followed was absolute. The string quartet had taken a break. Half the table turned toward me like synchronized swimmers. Mom blinked rapidly as if trying to process what she just heard. Dad froze with his glass halfway to his mouth. The waiter hesitated, eyes darting between me and the main table. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I wasn't seated with the party. I'm not covering their bill. Kevin leaned forward then, forearms on the table with that smirk he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand in a situation. "You're seriously doing this right now?" he said, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come on, man. Don't be a dick, just pay like you always do." I met his eyes directly. No. That was all. No lengthy explanation, no raised voice, no dramatic speech about years of built-up resentment. Just a simple refusal. Kevin's practiced smile faltered slightly. He glanced sideways at Brittany's father, who was now frowning slightly, the expression of a man who's just realized something doesn't add up in a business deal. Mom jumped into the silence, voice unnaturally bright and brittle. "Rob, honey, let's not do this here. We already told Brittany's family everything was taken care of for the evening." I shrugged, a single shoulder raise and drop. "Then I guess someone better take care of it." The waiter was now visibly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, the black folder clutched in front of him like a shield. "So who should I give the check to then?" I nodded toward the main table. "Anyone but me." Kevin stood up then, color rising in his face, the mask of sophisticated entrepreneur slipping to reveal the entitled child beneath. "Are you seriously going to screw us over in front of her family after everything we've done for you?" That line was so rich it could have bought its own table, but I didn't respond, didn't engage, just picked up my coat from the back of the chair, retrieved the unopened bottle of champagne I'd brought that no one had even acknowledged, and turned toward the exit. As I walked away, I heard Kevin's voice again, louder this time with an edge of panic creeping in. "Wow, you're really just walking out? Just like that?" I paused at the threshold, turned just enough to deliver a parting line that wasn't shouted or dramatic. Just matter of fact, yeah. I'm done picking up the tab. I let the engagement dinner incident sit for a few days. Didn't say anything. Didn't answer their increasingly frantic calls and texts. Figured silence would do more damage than anything I could possibly say. But I kept my ears open through Uncle Bobby and a few mutual acquaintances, and it didn't take long for things to start unraveling. First came a call from a number I didn't recognize about 5 days after the dinner. Almost sent it to voicemail, but something made me answer. It was Brittany, Kevin's now ex-fiancée. Her voice wasn't what I expected. No tears, no hysterics, no accusations. She sounded calm, controlled, like someone who'd already processed the emotional breakdown and moved into damage control mode. The voice of someone raised with enough money to know that emotions are secondary to protecting assets. She asked without preamble if I had invested $10,000 into Kevin's tech company, and whether I was acting as a silent partner as he had claimed. Said it very directly, like she was confirming a fact she already suspected was false. "No," I said simply. No elaboration, no defensiveness. She went quiet for a beat, just the sound of soft breathing on the line, then explained the situation with the same detached precision you'd expect from a corporate lawyer. Her father had put $185,000 into Kevin's supposed company based largely on the strength of Kevin's claim that I was backing the venture. He had shown them investment documents with my name, my signature, and my supposed role as operations advisor. Turns out Kevin scanned an old rental form I'd signed years ago and just pasted the signature everywhere like a startup Mad Lib. That signature, of course, was forged, so was the entire story. I didn't react with shock or outrage, just confirmed again that I had no involvement with any of Kevin's business ventures and never had never signed any documents, had never agreed to any advisory role, had never invested a dime in any official capacity. Brittany thanked me for the confirmation in a voice that had dropped 10 degrees colder, then mentioned almost casually that the engagement was off and her father's legal team would be in touch with Kevin directly. Over the next week, more calls trickled in. Finn, Kevin's college friend who'd gone on to actually build a successful software company, $65,000 invested in Kevin's phantom business. Another guy named Sam who'd met Kevin at some networking event, $30,000 a woman named Isabel who'd apparently dated Kevin briefly 2 years earlier, $15,000 in what she thought was a private investment opportunity, all based on documents with my forged signature, all based on the story that I, the stable, employed brother with actual assets, was involved as a silent partner and guarantor. Realization hit like a sledgehammer. Kevin hadn't just been using me as an ATM all these years. He'd been using my reputation, my work history, my financial stability as the foundation for an elaborate house of cards. The one thing I'd built, a name as someone who paid his debts and kept his word, he'd been weaponizing against other people while treating me like garbage. This wasn't just mooching anymore, this was criminal fraud with my name attached to it. If I stayed silent, I might as well be complicit. I spent a weekend gathering evidence, Had the people who'd contacted me forward all the documents Kevin had sent them, created a timeline of investments and claims, made copies of text messages and emails where he'd referenced me or my supposed involvement, built a complete picture of the fraud without ever contacting Kevin or my parents directly. Then on Monday morning, I drove to the county sheriff's office, walked in wearing work clothes, no appointment, no lawyer, asked to speak to someone about financial fraud, was directed to a detective who looked like he'd seen every scam imaginable and was tired of all of them. I laid everything out without emotion. No family drama, no backstory about the dinner or years of being used. Just facts. My identity was used to commit financial fraud against multiple victims. Here's the evidence I've gathered. Left the folder with all the documentation and my contact information. Drove to work. Didn't tell anyone in the family what I'd done. Just waited. A week later, Kevin got served with papers. Finn had already filed charges for wire fraud and misrepresentation. Brittany's father followed once he realized there were other victims involved. The detective I'd spoken to called to let me know they were building a case and would need a formal statement. Investigators started digging and didn't have to go far. Kevin had been almost laughably lazy with his fraud, reusing the same basic investment documents for multiple victims, just changing dates and dollar amounts, but keeping my forged signature in the same exact position on each form. The same fake company address, the same bogus projections with just the numbers changed. 3 days after Kevin was served, Mom finally texted, not to ask what was happening or why Kevin was facing legal trouble, just a request for me to come over and talk it out with him. Said the situation was getting out of hand and that we needed to present a united front as a family. Her proposed solution, apparently, was for me to go with them to Brittany's father's office and explain that the whole thing was a misunderstanding that had gotten blown out of proportion. She still thought this could be managed, contained, spun into something other than what it was. She had no idea how far past that point we already were. Sunday afternoon, I pulled into my parents' driveway. Didn't call ahead, didn't respond to the multiple messages asking me to come over and help fix the situation. Just showed up when I knew they'd all be there. The house looked the same as always. 2-story colonial with the pretentious pillars Mom had insisted on adding during the last renovation. Dad's leased BMW in the driveway next to Mom's white Lexus SUV. Kevin's Audi was there too. The one with the vanity plate referencing some inside joke no one actually got. Walked in without knocking. Family house, family meeting. Found them in the living room. The tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Kevin looked like absolute hell, unshaven, dark circles under bloodshot eyes, wearing what appeared to be the same sweatpants and hoodie for multiple days, pacing back and forth on the designer rug like a caged animal, stopping occasionally to check his phone as if waiting for a message that would magically solve everything. Mom was perched on the edge of the couch, back ramrod straight, hands clutching a teacup that had long gone cold. She'd clearly dressed for the occasion in what she considered serious discussion attire, cashmere sweater and pearls, hair freshly styled. Dad sat in his leather recliner, looking suddenly older, the lines in his face deeper than I remembered. He was still in his Sunday golf clothes despite the November chill outside, as if maintaining routine could somehow hold back the tsunami heading for their carefully constructed facade. They all looked up when I entered. Mom immediately stood, relief washing over her face. Rob, thank goodness, we've been trying to reach you. This whole thing has gotten completely out of control. Kevin's been... I cut her off by placing a thick manila folder on the glass coffee table. The sound it made, a flat, decisive thud, silenced the room instantly. I turned all of this into the county sheriff's office last Monday, I said, voice even and calm. They're building a case against Kevin for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and wire fraud across state lines. The folder contained everything. Printouts of the forged documents with my signature highlighted in yellow. Statements from the various victims detailing how much they'd invested and what they'd been promised. Screenshots of text messages where Kevin had referenced me as his business partner. Copies of bank statements showing the money flow. I'd spent days putting it together, making sure every detail was clear, every connection documented. Wanted them to see exactly what I'd seen, to understand the scope of what Kevin had done while they enabled him. Kevin exploded first, as I knew he would. Launched into a tirade about how I was ruining his life, how I'd always been jealous of him, how I should have just backed him when he needed it and none of this would have happened. You could have just signed on, he shouted, spittle flying. It would have cost you nothing. Everyone would have made money. But no, you had to be self-righteous about it, had to play the honest working man while stabbing your own brother in the back. I didn't respond, didn't engage with the tantrum, just stood there, arms at my sides, watching the performance with the detached interest of someone observing an animal at the zoo. Mom tried to step in, always the mediator, always looking for the compromise that would maintain the family illusion. "There has to be a way to fix this," she said, voice wavering between authoritative and pleading. "Maybe you could make a statement saying you had initially agreed to be part of the business, but there was a misunderstanding about the extent of your involvement, or that you verbally authorized Kevin to act on your behalf." I looked directly at her, really seeing her for perhaps the first time in years. "I'm not lying for him," I said flatly. "Not again. Not for money, not for peace, not for family. If you contact me about this again, I'll add witness tampering and harassment to the case file." Dad finally spoke up. "You'd really let your brother go to jail? Your own blood?" "He put himself there," I replied. "I'm just not pulling him out this time." I turned and walked toward the door without another word. Behind me, I heard Kevin's voice crack with something between rage and fear. "You're dead to me. You hear that? Dead." I didn't look back. Just kept walking. Left the folder on the table with all the evidence of years of lies and manipulation. Left the house that had never really been a home. Left the people who had never really been family in any way that mattered. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or vindication, but a strange kind of peace. Like putting down a weight I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. 2 weeks later, the charges were official. Kevin took a plea deal, 14 months in a minimum security facility plus restitution orders he'd never be able to fulfill. Investigators discovered he'd already set up offshore accounts and converted a significant portion of the money to untraceable cryptocurrency before being caught. My parents narrowly avoided charges themselves. Prosecutors couldn't prove they knew about the fraud, despite their suspicious financial movements. 6 months passed. Used the time to rebuild my life without the constant financial drain. Took Megan to the mountains for a week, proposed on a cliff overlooking a river valley. No audience, no cameras, no social media announcement. She said yes without hesitation. Fixed up the house, built a serious gym in the basement with equipment that would last decades. Put away more money in 5 months than I had in the previous 2 years combined. Life developed a rhythm that wasn't dictated by other people's emergencies. Then things got interesting. Late April, I got a call from Bobby. "Thought you should know what's happening," he said without preamble. Kevin ran one last scam from inside his holding cell. He laid it out in military precision. Kevin had been running an even bigger scam from inside his pre-sentencing holding pattern. Had convinced my parents that with enough money he could make a deal to avoid jail time entirely. Some story about a high-priced fixer who had connections with the judge, the prosecutor, and the victims. My parents, desperate to avoid the public shame of a son in prison, had fallen for it completely, taken a second mortgage on the house, emptied what remained of their retirement accounts, borrowed from friends and extended family members. All told, they'd scraped together just over $120,000 for this supposed legal miracle worker. There was no fixer, no secret deal. Kevin had directed the money to an offshore account, then used just enough of it to make a partial restitution payment to Brittany's father, the minimum needed to keep additional federal charges from being filed. The rest had vanished, presumably stashed somewhere for his eventual release. Now my parents were facing bankruptcy, foreclosure, and possible criminal charges themselves for signing fraudulent loan documents. Their house was weeks away from auction. Dad's leased car had already been repossessed from the country club parking lot, the ultimate public humiliation in their social circle. "They're going to come to you," Bobby said finally. "Thought you should know." I thanked him and hung up. Didn't feel the satisfaction some might expect. Just a hollow confirmation of what I'd already known about the family dynamic, that it would continue its dysfunctional patterns with or without my participation. But that night, I made some calls. First to my company's legal team, then to a private investigator I'd used when vetting subcontractors for some renovation work, finally to a real estate agent. Few days later, the doorbell rang at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Expected. My parents on the porch, looking like weathered versions of themselves. Let them in without a word. Megan was heading to the gym with a silent squeeze of my shoulder as she passed. I appreciated the space to handle this final confrontation on my terms. They sat awkwardly on the edge of the couch. The silence stretched until Dad finally broke it, explaining their situation, the foreclosure, the debt, the complete collapse of everything, Kevin's final betrayal. "We have nowhere else to go," Dad finally said, the admission clearly costing him. "We could lose everything." "We're still your family," Mom added, tears held in check. "We made mistakes, but we love you." "Love doesn't come with a price tag," I replied. "And if it did, you'd have maxed out your credit long ago." Reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, slid it across the coffee table without explanation. "What's this?" Mom asked, not moving to take it. Open it. Inside were printouts, mortgage documents, transfer of deed, settlement statements, legal paperwork showing that their house, the one scheduled for foreclosure auction in 3 weeks, had been purchased by an LLC registered in Wyoming. My LLC, created 5 days earlier with the help of the company legal team. I'd bought their mortgage debt from the bank at a 40% discount, the distressed property investment made possible by my years of saving while they spent. I own your house now. Technically, you're my tenants. Their faces transformed from desperate hope to confusion to horror as the implications set in. What? This can't. Are you evicting us? Mom hissed. No. I'm teaching you how the real world works. Handed them a second envelope. This is a lease agreement, 1-year term, $900 monthly rent, well below market value for that neighborhood. You'll both get jobs. You'll pay on time. You'll save what you can. After 12 months of perfect payment history, I'll sell you the house at my purchase price, if you can qualify for a mortgage. Dad started to object. I cut him off with a raised hand. Alternative is immediate eviction, and you can explain to your remaining friends why you're living in a motel on the highway. Your choice. Silence. Where are we supposed to get $900 a month? Mom finally asked. McDonald's is hiring. So is Walmart. Amazon warehouse starts at $17 an hour with benefits. Construction sites always need laborers. I shrugged. Welcome to how the other half lives. And Kevin? She asked, unable to stop herself. Kevin doesn't exist to me anymore, and he's never setting foot on any property I own. That includes the house now. His name isn't on the lease, and if he shows up, you're all in violation and out on the street. Consider it a restraining order with teeth. After some hesitation, they signed the lease on the spot. No further negotiation, no tears, just the scratch of pen on paper and the cold reality of their new circumstances sinking in. As they were leaving, Dad paused at the threshold. Why help us at all after everything? I'm not helping you. I'm breaking the cycle. You raised a son who can't function in reality because you never had to face it yourselves. Now you're all going to learn what life actually costs when you can't outsource the bill to someone else. They left in silence, closed the door behind them. Megan returned an hour later, gym bag over her shoulder. They gone? Yes. Think they'll make it? She asked, grabbing a protein shake from the fridge, shrugged. Not my problem anymore. The strangest part? It didn't feel like revenge. This wasn't that. This was simply allowing natural consequences to occur while removing myself from the equation. First month after the confrontation, my parents acted like they were living in some dystopian nightmare. Mom sent texts almost daily with pictures of Dad in his new uniform at Home Depot, her at the customer service desk at Target, messages full of barely disguised martyrdom, like I was supposed to be shocked or guilty that they were working retail at their age. Didn't respond to any of it. Just had my property management company confirm when their rent payments came in on time. No praise, no commentary, just business. By month 3, the martyr act started to fade. Dad actually mentioned liking some aspects of his job. The structure, the clear expectations, the fact that when his shift ended, he could actually leave work behind. Mom found she had a knack for customer service once she got over the initial humiliation. When their 1-year lease was up, I renewed it for another 12 months at the same rate. They'd been perfect tenants, rent always on time, property well maintained, no drama. Dad had been promoted to department manager at Home Depot. Mom had moved from Target to a better-paying office admin role at a local business. They were building something real, for perhaps the first time in their adult lives. Not glamorous, but solid, sustainable, based on what they could actually earn rather than what they could borrow or bluff. My door isn't locked to them anymore, but the ATM is permanently closed. Respect is earned, not bought, not tied to blood, just earned. Family isn't about shared blood or last names. It's about who shows up when you're at your worst, who helps without keeping score, who sees your value beyond what you can provide. By that definition, I'd found my real family, and it had nothing to do with the people who'd raised me.